What if the secret to standing out in a crowded market isn't just about what you sell, but what you dare to disagree with? Today on Strategy Talks, we're tearing apart tired branding playbooks with Alex Smith. He's the founder of Basic Arts and author of No Bullshit Strategy, who's helped CEOs turn hidden differentiators into unbeatable advantages. Get ready for the counterintuitive tactics that make brands impossible to ignore. Starting with why most strategy is just noise in disguise. If you're ready, so am I. Let's do this. Strategy Talk is next.
Let's strategize together. Let's hear it from an expert. Join the conversation, it's informative and free. You and me, let's talk some strategy. Now here's your host, Morin-van.
Hey everybody, it is me, Doreen. I am back with another episode of Strategy Talks, and I'm very excited for today's guest and to dive into some of this controversy about strategy. If you know me at all, I do social media strategy, and so this is definitely close to my heart. I'm so excited that Alex is here with us today. But before I bring him up on stage with me, I want to welcome all of you. If you're here with us through YouTube or LinkedIn or Facebook, please be sure that you are welcomed. If you have questions, leave them in the comments below. And for those of you who listen to Strategy Talks as a podcast, welcome to you as well. Without much further ado, here is my guest, Alex Smith. How are you today, Alex?
I'm okay, thanks. And how about that jingle?
I know.
That's the first strategy song I've ever heard.
Isn't it awesome? My son composed and sang it. So it's been on the show for going on 4 years. And we talked about redoing it, but it's very catchy. So there it is.
It ain't broke and all that.
Exactly. So Alex, let's dive into, I was on in your website and then I got your bio from you and you said, it's my goal to increase strategic understanding and expertise among founders, since it's not only something that's widely misunderstood, but often completely overlooked.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's start with us. Who are these founders that overlook strategy?
Oh, just all of them. I think about it like there are certain, let's say, assets that a business has, which are very binary. You know if you have one, you know if you don't. So like you either have a website or you don't have a website. Nobody is thinking, do I have a website? Do I not? So there's this very clear vacuum for people to fill. And this is true of actually like almost every single sort of asset within a business. But strategy, of course, it isn't, at least the way that most people do it, it's not this kind of physical object that you hold in your hands that is clear whether it's present or whether it isn't present, because it's more like the sort of unifying logic that ties all of the items, all the bits together. So it is, in a very real sense, it's kind of invisible. And so because of that, it obviously gets overlooked. And people, they tend to, I guess if I was to be, this is a little bit of a technical point, but since you asked, I think that people, they tend to just see their business as being a sort of a bag of items and tactics. And they think that pushing the business forward is a question of optimizing each one of those tactics and doing each element the best way that you can. And somehow they're just going to add up to more than the sum of their parts. But actually they don't. They add up to less than the sum of their parts, because the overriding thesis of the business, the fundamental idea, if you like, is actually weak in the first place. So, you can have a business, and I think there are a lot of businesses like this that are kind of a selection of exemplary tactics applied to a core business concept that is just stupid from the get-go. And so the founder or whatever, they're like, why doesn't anything work? My sales team is amazing. I'm doing the best possible sort of like marketing, like my customer service is incredible, blah, 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 blah. Why isn't anything working? And it's because the actual fundamental thing that the business is doing in the market is misaligned with what the market needs or wants. So if you're in that situation, nothing else matters. But because it's a very macro, big picture, zoomed out way of interpreting your business. And most people, the vast majority of human beings, they don't feel comfortable thinking that way. The majority of people are zoom inners, not zoom outers. And so they feel comfortable in the detail, but they don't feel comfortable just stepping back and saying, what exactly is the point of this thing? But that is fundamentally the most important question.
Yeah, no, for sure. I found that to be true in social media. So I am honing in on why you're doing all the things on social. Yeah, you want visibility, but what are your other goals? And I have seen the same thing. People, clients come to me and say, yeah, somebody told me about Pinterest. I think I need to do Pinterest. And I'm like, why? Just because somebody told you? Like, what's the idea behind it? What are your goals? What do you think you could, and how does it align with everything else you're doing? So I totally get that. And I think that's a really valid point. And I have found the same, what you have found, that a lot of people don't have a good strategy. And we were just discussing in the green room, one of my other frustrations is that if a founder or a stakeholder does have a strategy, they don't always share it with the team. And it's really important that everybody on the team understands what you're trying to accomplish. And so let's kind of talk about, you have this book, No Bullshit Strategy, and you call out generic strategies that don't differentiate brands. Why do so many businesses fall into this trap when they do have a strategy? And how can somebody break free? Because I think it's a very scary thing.
Sure. So first of all, let's just exclude all the businesses who don't even make any vague attempts at strategy, period, which is a very high proportion of them, 50% roughly,
Sure.
who are acting 100% reactively, who basically just like each day, they're just like fighting the fire that's come up that day. So there's a lot of them. So we'll put them aside. And then we move into the next big chunk, which is people who are in some sense trying to think strategically, but they are, but the strategies they're coming up with are basically non-strategies or these generic strategies that don't work. Now, we might say this isn't my preferred definition of strategy, but just so that we can encapsulate what these people are thinking. One of the most broad, overly broad and basic definitions of strategy is essentially how the business is going to win. So like you at least need to start off with this idea that, okay, just because we are a business in the market, we've got no God-given right to succeed. So we need to have a means by which we are going to win, a means by which we're going to be successful. We need to have some sort of idea or argument that reasonably is going to result in us not failing. So that would be the strategy. And so that then opens the door to a whole bunch of generic strategies, like you said. So the most common of these by far is any strategy which is along the lines of being better than the competition or outperforming the competition, being in any way superior. And almost everything that falls into the strategic bucket is in this space. So like a very common example will be that someone will say that, the reason that we are going to win and beat our competitors is because we have superior customer service, something like this, which is essentially just a way of saying we are the same as everyone else, but take our word for it when we say that we're better. And people articulate this in all sorts of ways, but the key thing to understand here, the commonality of better strategies and the reason that they don't work is because better strategies by definition are doubling, tripling, quadrupling, etc. up on something which already exists in the market, something that the customer can already get. And the market will not reward the best option in any particular sort of value offering space. Because think about it, from the outside, if you've got 10 businesses who are all doing the same thing, so let's say like 10 SEO agencies,
Sure.
right? And they're all saying, words to the effect of, we do the best SEO, so we will get you highest up the rankings, right? From the outside, like maybe one of them is much better than the other ones, but really I can't judge that. It might help with repeat purchase because, I was satisfied with them to begin with and I'll go back to them again, something like that. But it's not going to help with that initial purchase. Those businesses are basically just in a dogfight. And the one that's going to win is invariably the one that's the most famous, the one with the best contacts, the one who is prepared to spend the most on marketing, or the one who's the cheapest.
That's what I was going to say about marketing. Yes.
Yeah. Now, none of those things are good, right? Unless you happen to be like the OG Coca-Cola of the category, in which case maybe you can hold the center ground. All of those other things basically mean they're code for destroy your margin to win business. Even like spending a lot of money on marketing is a means of destroying your margin to win business. So this is why this is such an ineffective strategy. And this is why most businesses, they basically end up in this margin sapping race to the bottom to try and edge ahead of their competitors who are fundamentally doing the same thing that they are. So the only legitimate form of strategy, thinking very big picture, is not to be the best X, because even if you are, and by the way, you almost certainly are not. That's another side point there. I can't stand the way that people, they overstate their own abilities and they understate their competitors' abilities. So that's the side point. But even if you were the best, it wouldn't work for the reason I just described. So being the best X doesn't work. Only being the only X, whatever X is, that is the only thing that works. Because in that scenario, speaking very broadly, then if people want the thing that you are selling, you're the only game in town. What does that mean? It means that you have much more control over your pricing and you become much more profitable and you don't have to get sucked down into the competitive dogfight. So to your question about the generic strategies, when we remove all of the things that fall into the better bucket, very, very, very little is left over. And then I'm not saying everything that's left over is amazing, but then at least we're having a real strategic conversation after that point.
That's awesome. Yeah, I bookmarked your definition of strategy. It's the unique value a business provides to the market versus what the general one is, a plan designed to achieve a particular goal. So I really like that, the unique value a business provides to the market. And so then my next question to that goes, you once argued on, I listened to some of the podcasts, that unique point of disagreement instead of the unique selling proposition, right? It's much more powerful to do that and tapping into customer subconsciousness. And I think that is so interesting, but I bet you when you propose that to clients, you got a lot of pushback from people. Am I correct in that? They don't want to do something and stand out. They don't necessarily want to disagree or not offer everything that the competitors do. I mean, I work with founders too, and they hold on so tight and they go, well, this is what the competitors are doing. I mean, whether I talk about marketing or, any other kind of strategy, they're so trained to look at what others do. How do we get past that? How do we tell them that it's okay to be different? It's okay to have that, not just a unique selling proposition, but, to offer something that nobody else is doing and that it's going to actually help them.
It's funny that you say that, because actually, no, it's not a problem that I have, but I think that's purely because the people who end up speaking to me are very self-selecting. I'm sure that 70% of founders would have a problem with this, and I just never encounter them. So it's not an issue that I have. But I think that the way to think about it is like this: contrarianism and being disagreeable is the means, it's not the end. So if you understand the basic idea of, okay, we want to be the only, not the best, you then need to come up with an idea to be the only, and you quickly run into a brick wall, which is that there isn't all this low-hanging fruit out there to be picked. Like, customers in any given category are not screaming for some new solution which isn't being provided, because if they were, someone would bloody provide it. So those opportunities, they don't hang around very long. And this is why another reason why most people are incapable of coming up with good strategies, because they tend to look to the customer, because this is best practice that everyone tells us to do. They tend to look to the customer and to sort of ask the customer to tell them what they should offer. But the customer's frame of reference is very narrow and limited, and it's already been well satisfied by the market at the moment. Unless you're in an incredibly sort of emerging new market, the customer is well satisfied, or the problems that they have are for some reason not solvable on the terms that the customer's putting it across. So the customer is not going to tell you, give me X, and you're like, oh, I can do that, and then off you ride to fame and fortune. That's not going to happen. So this is why people hit a brick wall. So then you need to think, okay, well, how can I come up with this needle in a haystack idea, which is both valuable to the customer, but also original and different and new? And the only way that you can do that is through essentially being contrarian against the norms of the category. This is why you have to explore the ways that you already differ with the category and the ways that you disagree with the category. Now, the point here is not to create some kind of rambunctious, ornery, like sort of two fingers up to the system kind of brand, right? Mm-hmm. You can do that. Some brands are like, there's nothing wrong with that. But like, that doesn't have to be the end result. But all you're doing is you were exploring these points of disagreement in order to try and generate a new value concept in your category. So for example, I don't know, like the absolute textbook strategic case study, like Southwest Airlines invented low-cost air travel, so very, very cheap air travel, but they had to do that by removing any element of service for business travelers in air travel, which now seems obvious, but at the time that was very radical, because business travelers were the most valuable with the most valuable customer segment. So American Airlines, United, the last thing they would have done is put business travelers in the bin. But Southwest did, and then suddenly, boom, 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 they readjust their business model, and ta-da, we got this whole new category, right? So they were only able to come up with that category because of the disagreeable contrarian move that they made within the category norms. Now, when they come out on the other side of that, Southwest doesn't come along saying like, oh, business travelers suck, da, 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 da. They never need to mention that, because this was just a means of arriving at this new space. And the reason you're doing all of this is to give the customer something new, to give the customer something they hadn't had before. So to answer your question, this is an act of extreme generosity. You're not like being difficult for the sake of it. Like, I believe that if a business, any business, is not offering new value to customers, new value that was not available before that business was created, and if you remove that business, that form of value would go away. If a business is not offering new value to customers, that business should never have been created, and that business has no right to survive, which is a very harsh way of putting it. But like most of us, myself included, this is only natural. We form our businesses not to serve the market, not to bring new value to the market. We form our businesses to serve ourselves. We form our businesses because we want more of the pie and we want to have time freedom and all the rest of it. And guess what? The market doesn't give a crap about that. And why should it? So very quickly, if you want to survive, you have to flip your thinking and you have to be like, well, look, we've got no right to exist. If we are going to be successful, we need to give the people something that they haven't seen before. And so then you have to go through the creative process to come up with that thing. And the whole disagreement thing is just, it's not the only way you can do that, but it's probably the most sort of simple and reliable way that you can do that.
All right. I had this in my notes, this example. So there's one follow-up question that I have. So in the case of Southwest Airlines, when you are coming up with this contrarian value or this contrarian idea, is it a case-by-case thing that you would either neglect what's happening so you don't mention it, like you said, or are there times where you actually bring it to the foreground and you actually attack the previous ideas and go, hey, this is not, we don't like this, or we don't want that. Or, you said with Southwest, you don't even have to talk about it, right? They just took away business class. Or is that something that you can make people go, that makes sense? Like, give them that idea to have to explain it. Is there one over the other that's better?
So taking away business class, we got to remember is that you could call this like a sort of, let's call this making this up on the spot now. Let's call this a 3-step process.
Yeah.
Step 1, disagreement, contrarian thinking. Actually, business class is optional or whatever in the category. Step 2 is innovation. So you actually got to do something physical about it. In Southwest case, okay, we just remove it. We just take it out of the planes. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff as well. But for the sake of simplicity, let's just say it was just taking that out of the planes. Then step 3 is what is the consequential value creation of that change? And in their case, it's low cost air travel. So far, far cheaper tickets than there had ever been before, let's say. Now, you notice that there is from an external point of view, we know that under the hood, the low cost air travel was enabled by the removal of business class.
Right.
The customer doesn't need to know that. All they need to know is what's in it for them, which is the newly created value. So to me, it doesn't make sense to use that example. And this is true of 80-90%, I think, of examples. It doesn't make sense to go out there and say, hey, we've got rid of business class so that you can go cheaper kind of thing, because it's a bit of a kind of like you're showing them how the sausage is made, and they probably don't really care. The only occasions when I think that it does pay to show people how the sausage is made is if you exist in a category where your customers are sort of intrinsically interested in what in the category, and it's almost like a sort of hobby for them. So I don't know, looking over here at like a guitar, let's say, right? So a person who buys a guitar, whatever, they are interested in guitars, because it's not like buying some bin bags or toilet paper or something like which you have to buy, but you're not interested in it. If you buy a guitar, you're interested in it. So you might be prepared to have a point of view and to enter into the point of view on the category. But if I'm buying a cheap airline ticket, I don't care about air travel per se. I just want the end result, what's in it for me. So that's a good little rule of thumb to say, how much do you show them the details of the sausage making?
Right. So instead of working on features, you just show them the benefits without explaining what they're getting.
Yeah. And so I sometimes think that if you were to sort of put this into a comms hierarchy, which is obviously moving into a more executional space, but and there are clearly lots of exceptions to this, but generally speaking, I would sort of say that the comms hierarchy is layer 1, statement of the new value being created. Layer 2, statement of how you create that value. Yeah. That would be especially in a B2B sort of space.
Sure.
I think in a B2C space, where it's a little bit less detailed and a bit more emotive, you could question whether you really need to. You could just explain what's happening at the top. This isn't a good example. It's just the example that springs to mind. There are much better examples, but Nike never justified just do it. They never sort of had to unpack that for you. Right. You just sort of take it as read, and you can connect just do it, super vague, abstracted value statement with the sneaker down below. And there's actually a thread between those things. But because they're a B2C brand, you'd ruin the magic if you started to say, well, what just do it means is blah, blah, blah. And the way that we manifest that in our shoes is blah, 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 blah. To me, it doesn't work. It's not a taste.
Yeah. Yeah. So I know we're like 5 minutes out, and I have something that I read in your book that I want to talk to you about. In the section of coming up with ideas, you talked about the Dolly Parton principle, or the Dolly principle.
Love it. Love it.
Can we talk about that? What is it? And I love Dolly Parton. And for those of you watching and listening, I lived in South Carolina when my kids were little, and the Dolly Library, where she and her team send a free book every month to any child that's from birth until they start kindergarten, to show them, to give them the gift of reading. And I have 4 children, so I got lots and lots and lots of free books from this woman. I absolutely love her wisdom. So
at the moment.
Yeah. So I just watching, reading this in you. I mean, I think it's awesome. So the phrase is find out who you are and do it on purpose. Can you, as we close out, talk about strategy, coming up with ideas? I think this is a great way to get people into some action once they've watched this, listened to this. What is the Dolly principle, Alex, and how can somebody use that to come up with a great idea?
All you need to know about all strategy in the shortest possible sentence. Don't need to read my book or anything. If you can understand this sentence, then everything else falls into place. So obviously she was talking, this is advice for a person as opposed for a business, but the patterns and the dynamics are actually completely identical. So you can apply, and this is true of strategy in general, you can apply everything in both ways because the patterns, they map in both cases. But when you first hear that sentence, it sounds like a bit of generic, just be yourself kind of advice that doesn't really it's nothing special. But actually, that's only at first glance. If you actually unpack it, what she's saying is incredibly strategically rich and very, very, it goes very against the normal messages that we're given. So the main thing you need to notice is that she doesn't say, which I think is the main message that most people in business and life will be given. She doesn't say, decide who you want to be and then go and be that. Instead, she says, find out who you are already, whether you like it or not, with no choice or a decision-making on your behalf, and then just get on board with that thing, sort of accept your innate characteristic, your innate gifts, go with it, do it on purpose, and then things will start to work. And this is exactly what you see with strategy. Because when you have a business, I'm not talking about like a brand new idea that doesn't exist yet. I'm talking about a business that's been in the market a few years. It's got a degree of traction. Once you've created that business and it's operating, that business has a mind of its own. It has an identity of its own, which is separate from the will of the founder. Because what's going to happen is that the market is going to interpret that business in a way that suits the market. And the business is going to start to be drawn towards the path of least resistance in the market. So there'll be certain things that the customers perceive in the business that they like, which will be driving the traction. And here's the important thing. Those things are very, very rarely the thing that the founder initially intended or the thing that the founder thinks is important. Your first idea, when you put it out there, is just a prototype to get you in the game. But after 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, whatever it's going to be, you need to step back and say, what actually is this thing? Because sure as eggs are eggs, the thing that you've created is not the thing that you meant to create. Because it actually it's negotiating its own sort of identity with the market, with the customer. So as the founder, you need to say, okay, not what do I want this business to be, not what is my vision, what did I imagine that we were going to be doing here. You need to put all of that in the bin and you need to say, what is this thing? And you need to look deeply into what accidental, unexamined things are going on with this business, which is giving it traction, which then, when I embrace them and lean into them, I can then grow the business. So classic example of this is you probably are aware of the founding story of Facebook, how it started off as this hot or not app in Harvard so that to rate how hot classmates were, right? So that was like Zuckerberg's actual idea, right? That was his like prototype idea. Now, imagine what would have happened if he had been like, my vision is the hot or not app. That is what we are making. And damn it, I'm going to make this work come hell or high water. And he kept on pushing that. It it would have gone nowhere. But obviously he had the sort of detachment and humility to see, wait a minute, this thing is evolving into something else. Let's go with it and let's see where the business wants to take me. That which then obviously led to Facebook and everything else. So he displayed like a perfect example of humble leadership there, essentially. A perfect example of the Dolly Parton principle. And yes, I just think that one of the things that stops most founders from doing this is that they are incapable of accepting that their initial idea almost always is dumb or flawed. And it's just to get you in the game. But that is not the thing that you are making. Look, I've been doing my business for, I don't know what it is, let's call it 8-9 years, something like that. I only discovered what the business actually was after 7 years. So everything I was doing in years 0 to 7 was bullshit. I mean, I was like sort of making money and it was like, okay, but like it was prototype stage. It was experimentation stage. The penny only dropped of what I was actually doing without meaning to do it in year 7. And then I was like, oh, why don't I actually just do this on purpose? And then and on you go. So that's why that phrase is so powerful and so important. And like I say, I just think so countercultural in this world of, if you can dream it, you can be it, blah, 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 which we all know on a very basic level isn't really true. We all know that if you're, if you're like 4'3", you're not going to play in the NBA, blah, blah, blah. So you explode that out big picture. And we're all better served to exploit our gifts rather than chase gifts that we actually don't have and put our true gifts in the bin.
Wow, that's heavy, but that's good. And I love that we ended with Dolly. So Alex, we are at time. Where can people find you? Where can they get a hold of this book? And where should they follow you on social media?
Yeah, sure. Well, No Bullshit Strategy is obviously on all the Amazons and stuff. So realistically, that's the easiest way to do that. Then you can find me on LinkedIn or YouTube as Alex M.H. Smith, because obviously if it was just Alex Smith, I'd be impossible to Google. So it's not just because I'm pretentious. And then also like my newsletter is obviously the best channel, where you can find that at basicarts.org/newsletter.
Yes. And I can attest to that being an incredible newsletter. I subscribe and learn new things each time it drops in my inbox. So Alex, I do, shout out to that. That's, I think, how I discovered you and why I wanted you on the show, because you have great insight. So I'll be back next week with another episode of Strategy Talks. I want to thank all of you for staying till the end. Alex, I appreciate you being with us today, and see you later, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye.